在亚洲艺术文献库呢，我们非常重视跟这个艺术家的合作，所以我们已经看到刚刚阿拉给了我们一个很精彩的一个示范啊，包括昨天我们看到文贤的展览，还有明天还有一个关于生物的一个作品啊。我们重视跟艺术家的合作，是因为呢，艺术家他带来关于档案的很多不同的可能性啊，他打开了很多不同的想象啊，丰富了我们的对这个事情的理解啊。那么同样重要的是，我们拿到这个艺术家给我们的一个想象的空间以后，我们怎么样去回馈到我们更加基础的关于档案和艺术史的研究工作上边啊。那么接下来这个单元呢，我们有3位非常杰出的3组非常杰出的演讲者他们呢的研究分别是关于台湾、越南跟新加坡的那么我觉得有趣的是，我们把他们3位放在一起，3组人放在一起，其实他们3组他们的研究方法的切入点，还有他们表述的方法是有很多不一样的地方我们从他们的相互比较里面，也看到这个比较基础性的研究工作里面的一些方法上的丰富性和差异那么接下来我们就邀请第一位演讲者叶新柔欢迎。
各位先进大家好，我是叶信柔，也非常感谢大会 AAA 的邀请，让我有这个机会跟在座各位分享今天这个议题行动者坐标在地实验与黄明川90年代中旬的影片记录行动。那英文把它定名为 Actors Coordinates Actions Through Film Recording by Atta and 黄明川 in the mid-1990s. So这个题目定为行动者坐标，是因为我想要将这一个分析的对象放在艺术工作者个体的身上，而不是艺术空间。那我们都知道90年代的独立艺术空间大多是从视觉艺术家所组成的，那相较于表演艺术，视觉艺术创作者他们大多都是单兵作战，不是团体战。独立艺术空间出现，促使他们必须成群结队向外发声，建立品牌。那可以想见，从这个原本从内省为主的一个方法，转向社会去表态，进而宣称自我的定位，进入繁琐的务实的空间营运。这个转向其实高度诉诸每一位个体他去对于社会关心跟公共利益还有自我期待的一个投射。那换句话说，90年代的台湾是一个表态也是一个行动的时代，它之于民主政治如此，之于艺术工作者亦然。我想要指出的是，每一位独立艺术空间的出现呢，它都是呈现独立艺术工作者的一个行动主义的特质。那题目以坐标论，是我希望指出个体在都市地理空间中的位置，在文化场域空间中的立场，去勾勒个体的一个行动的轨迹，捕捉90年代独立艺术空间，它其实是一个空间跟文化资本交互博弈的一个动态的协商关系。那选择以影片作为研究材料，不是图片文字，是因为我深深有感于影片所保留下的摄影机之眼，它流动于场所之间，它体现了持摄影机者在不同空间之间的一个行动。我的目的在于捕捉台湾独立艺术空间它兴起的时候，艺术工作者作为一个行动者 actor， 他的一个战略位置，从记录行动的论点切入，我企图去拓扑出90年代台北的文化空间，还有行动于这些空间当中的艺术工作者们的情境，去逼近所谓我们现在去指称独立艺术空间的前卫性格跟社会意义。90年代中旬的台湾是电影跟纪录片都进入独立制作时代，家用摄影机 DV 开始风行。不止如此网络跟个人电脑进入工作跟家庭以影片去记录与记录去叙事。 进而用影音叙事来响应众生喧哗的民主前景，是那个时候台湾跟全球各国其实都同步展开的科技的生活。在即时影片内容变多的多元的时刻，在台湾90年代中出现2组队伍，长期而且频繁的记录艺术展演的现场。如画面上，一个是95年成立之初以论坛空间为定位，其后以自媒体之姿成立的网络电视台的在地实验 ETA。那另外一组呢，是1989年展开独立制片工作的黄明川导演。那我这一场讲座所挑选的影片案例呢，是这2组记录团队所记录的案例当中的少数。一个是在地实验记录为期2年的华山酒厂争取保留，从97到98年。那另外一个案例是黄明川导演受台北县立文化中心委托拍摄3天的实验噪音活动——台北国际后工业艺术季。那这2者呢，都具体而为呈现北台湾90年代中旬前卫文化跟都市空间，他们2者在互相角力的一个时刻呢，它正是反映台湾当时候的替代空间其实是位处于文化与政治交互润泽、短瞬即逝的一种，我比喻为潮间带的一个地理区间。那换句话说，当我们谈论台湾的替代空间逐渐增加的时候，前卫艺术跟民主转型过程持续彼此发酵的90年代，其实我们不能忽视，那其实是台湾长达数年翻腾的一个空间检验过程。那我们从80年代谈起的话呢，当代艺术跟小剧场分别经历了从平面到装置，从黑盒子到街头的这个美学转向。那这一股发动自一个空间生产的一个文化动力，其实到90年代成为创作者他推演至另类空间（alternative space） 跟公共场域 （public sphere） 的意义的实践。那透过这2组影片，我想要指出，其实在媒介上面，影片的时机的特质，也就是 time-based 的这个特质呢，它可以更全面的记录在时间当中所经验的改变，也更可以为文化行动的过程保留下许许多多难以言喻的片刻。那接下来我将分别叙述3个段落。第一个段落是针对2个案例去铺陈、去陈述他们与90年代台湾的艺术史的关联。那第2个案例是简介两组持摄影机的行动者们，他们如何透过影片去逼近上述2个事件的现场。那再来就是透过观看影片的片段，去将这个我定义为手持摄影机所写下的历史去如何去兑现出影片在记录发生的当下，和我们如今去解读所产生的一些多重的讯息。那第一个案例是后工业艺术季发生在板桥酒厂，那这其实是台湾首次主办的大型的国际的实验噪音的表演，它发生在板桥火车站旁边。那为期有3天2夜，这个活动我们可以把它视为是其实是在往前推。93到94年之间，台北公馆地区甜蜜蜜咖啡馆这个集结朋克、安纳奇艺术家、广纳小剧场、实验电影跟前卫艺术的基地，它所滋长出来的前卫能量的国际的串联。那它也可以同时，它也是视为一样的时间，我们再往前推。1993年开始，艺术家王福瑞他创办乐迷小志。Noise 以降呢，台湾的实验噪音听众第一次的大型集结。那后工业之后，台湾90年代其实不复见同样规模由官方跟民间合力去举办的跨国的实验噪音活动。那我们后设的来看呢，其实后工业是揭露的是台湾朋克或叛克的能量的一个峰值型的事件，它也意味着台湾替代空间，或者我们更广义的去谈非典型的实验艺术空间，它可能在当时候已经面临到一种规模上，也就是量体上，或者甚至是尺度上、文化尺度上的一个发展的局限。 下一个案例是华山酒厂哦，97到98年间，数十位不同的艺术领域创作者、策展人，包含视觉啊、表演啊、建筑啊，他们聚集起来，跟地方里民还有中央政府协商，争取将酒厂的园区建筑保留，转作文化目的使用啊。那甚至希望打造为台北的庞毕度中心。98年华山酒厂确实已经成功转型为文化目的使用。99年它更名为华山英文特区，那由艺术家们、艺术工作者们组成中华民国艺术文化环境改造协会，简称环改会去经营。而到了2003年之后呢，华山酒厂开始因为中央政策的关系，转向文创产业园区来转型发展哦。直到今天也是以商业展演为主哦。相较于上面两个案例呢，我们可以发现，后宫艺术季的参与者多半属于无政府甚至反政府的立场哦。空间对他们来说是什么呢？艺术对他们来说又是什么呢？他们的创作的状态比较是站在社会批判的立场哦。艺术比较接近是在都会空间当中游牧甚至游击式的去创造偶发挑衅社会的一个文化反堵的一个事件哦 ，culture jamming 的这个事件。相较于华山哦，华山的倡议保留者比较偏向是参与式民主的一个务实派哦，他们力求厂房在中央政府也就是文建会支持下提供艺文界长期使用。那我们以现在来看，98年的当时华山酒厂的运动可以说是以成功作结，这代表那个时候回到90年代的大台北地区哦。那个时候现有的艺术空间包含美术馆、剧场或替代空间，它有一个现象是它很可能不足以支撑当时候艺术多元发展的一个前景，以至于这个转型获得了一个公众的一个肯认哦。那同时也意味着艺术展演进入公共领域的这个发展势在必行。那总结这一个小段呢，其实因为台湾90年代在民主政治、两岸关系跟科技网络的等等的因素交杂影响之下，文化艺术被视为民主跟自由化的象征，同时也很快的遭遇中产社会跟市生化的价值的一个主导。我们所谓公共的空间，至于艺术生产，在当时候经常呈现一种游牧跟抢占的宣示的效应哦。那我前面所提到的艺术空间存在于潮间带的意涵，也属于如此。接着我们来看这两个案例的拍摄团队。首先是在地实验，在地实验创立于95年，由艺术家黄浩、陈凯煌和赵文琪3个人组成。他们成立之初有2个很明确的企图，一个是拍摄艺术家电影，那第二个是频繁的举办公开的论坛，讲者大多是90年代才完成国外学位的年轻的研究者、艺术家。98年，在地实验加入成员张赐福成立网络电视台，以自媒体之姿作为一个在地实验在艺术生态当中的一个自我的坐标。那长此以往，直到今天呢，他们也持续的积极的开发数位网络技术，去做自己的科技艺术的研发。影片好。OK， 好，没关系，这边原本是一段影片哦，可能因为档案的格式。好，作为90年代台湾少数关注各个领域的在地实验，对于华山酒厂事件的支援立场可想而知，也恰恰是在这一段紧跟着文化公共议题的运动现场期间呢，1998年在地实验以更为明确建立网络自媒体的定位。处在艺术生态之中，关注无以名状的事物。那这支影片想让大家看的是当时候拍摄的一个座谈会，园区即将营运的一个座谈会的一个现场。那下一个拍摄团队是黄明川导演。 那黄导的第一部剧情片《西部来的人》在1989年于金马奖公映，隔年1990年他发表了一本专书《独立制片在台湾西部来的人》。那因而黄导的一个独立制片的生涯刚好从1990年开始哦。他当年曾经这么说，他说独立制片的根本的理念就是行动，去做去完成一切电影所需要的程序。换言之，它是手工电影，它也主张行为本身呢。对我来，就我的自己的理解，独立制片这个概念其实是将电影从产制到放映的整个流程，从电影托拉斯结构当中脱钩。那独立制片宣言，同时也是推进台湾新电影宣言往前推进，从电影语言的开发或打开，更进一步将电影制作推向诉诸个人 DIY。Do it yourself 的个人主义式的影像生产，它同时也是社会主义式的人人都可以看电影跟做电影的全民美学。好，黄导他在95年受北县文化中心委托拍摄的后工业艺术季呢，其实是他首次在如今已经30多年的艺术纪录片生涯的第一支发行的艺术纪录片。那可惜影片上面画面上面没有办法看影片哦，那我这边就用口述的。从中我们可以发现，黄导在拍摄后工业艺术季的一些方法，其实有延续到他往后30多年的艺术纪录片的创作。那包含了事件驱动型的一个研究跟记录方法，还有一个是场域漫游跟多视点，甚至是域外的一个视点的记录的层次。那再来第三个就是以影片去留存声响的一些记录的实践。这一边我以黄导在2019年的时候所受访的时候的描述，向各位做这一段的摘要，去让简介给大家，为什么他在90年代中旬从剧情片的拍摄转向纪录片。他曾经在19年的时候受访时候提到说，他在破轮胎的这一支剧情片当中，他已经在预告纪录片在整个影像世界的重要性哦。台湾当时的纪录片还是以记录社会冲突为主，那其实下一个阶段很快就会来了。那大家各大生活在这个变换快速的社会当中的大家，有没有准备好要把这一切捕捉记录下来？那而后在黄导2000年之后呢，他发行了第一批完整的艺术纪录片《14位艺术家解放前卫》，也获得了台新奖的首奖，并且同时持续拍摄艺术与文学纪录片到今天。那他也在2013年开始去策划嘉义国际艺术纪录影展，去以拍片还有主办影展的方式，为艺术纪录片开拓了当代的定义。好 ，OK， 这边4段影片呢，不好意思，可能是格式的关系。好，那第一段影片是后工业里面有不少极摇的镜头。这些影片像是一个新闻画面一般，去追捕在表演的演出的现场，灵活去捕捉流动于台上台下表演者跟观众之间，那富含声响跟肢体的不明情绪的张力，在这个镜头语言里面丰富的呈现。那这样子的镜头其实具有强烈的具身性哦 ，embodiment， 与记录内容加成为一个极具渲染力的一个音画的表现。那第二段同样也是影片哦，后工业的纪录片开场有1分半左右的时间，是一个横向滑移的一个 dolly 的一个镜头。那整颗镜头从头到尾去凝视这个宽广的但是破旧的晦暗的一个厂房，去呈现艺术季它所举办的一个场地空间的一个量体。那从中也可以看到黄导他在对于公共场域的一个景观的关注，对于消失地景的一个人文关怀，更在他日后2000年之后的纪录片《地景风云》当中也是有所关注跟记录的。第3段影片是1997年艺术上华山游在地实验所拍摄的。那我们可以看到艺术工作者们他们身上背着大型的厚纸板呢，他们写的 每一个人写的一个字，他们每一个人拼起来的一句话，叫做华山保留更生为艺文特区哦。这某种程度是一个很 peaceful 的一个示威，然后希望留下一些版面，提供给一些媒体的一个过程。那随着镜头，我们看到97年呢，华山的一个园区的现况有很多地面不平整，甚至厂房破旧不堪使用的情况。那我们也可以看到艺术家彼此之间当天是非常同声和气的一个氛围。好，上一段是2段影片，是隔年98年在地实验去拍摄的哦。从97到98年的转变是什么呢？就是省文化处的官员，也就是当时的省文化处还有文建会的人呢，已经来到了园区。那影片记录着包含从整个倡议保留的艺术家汤黄珍，他去介绍整个园区的情况，然后前后后的互动的关系，包含去简介摆放在地上的关于华山的改建的一个模型等等的，从中也可以看出官员直到了98年呢，与前一年度的一个比较与艺术家比较对立的情况之下，已经走到了某一种有共识的过程。好，那结语这一段讲座呢，我想要提出的是说，以影片作为研究材料，其中一个目的是从创作者乃至于持摄影机的见证者的视线呢，去描绘内在于独立艺术空间，它既包含替代空间，也包含艺术家经营基地的这2种精神。那我认为90年代台湾独立艺术空间的出现、搬迁跟结束，其实除了受到很务实的物质资源的影响之外，更关键的其实是艺术创作社群的行动主义的意识，还有空间辩证的思维，乃至于以文化空间作为一个创作前卫性的一个博弈，还有代偿的一个策略。那这也是我们今天去思考当代艺术空间在公民社会定位中的一个很可行的一个策略。那迈入空间解严的90年代，很多艺术家都在创作，在思考如何在3维空间中去调配崭新的感知，如何在公共空间中展演自身，并突穿出社会未曾经验的一个感性的维度。一方面是当时许多空间的装置作品用以呈现批判性的要素，另外一方面对于空间政治性的敏锐，促使90年代许多艺术创作推向公共空间，也因为发生在公共空间，而转向创作，很多的创作都转向一个事件化的发展。当创作与事件的结合，就意味着这个创作是现实的、现地的、公共性的，容许欢迎观众参与的这些非物质的条件夹杂融合在一件创作里面。那它可能指的是展演的偶发性，也可能指的是作品的庞杂性。那当时有那么多的替代空间跟非典型空间所发生的展演，如今我们看来都有一个相对鲜明的企图，就是在空间解严与自由化的时代，艺术家们进行去试探既有的现代性框架，并从中去翻找出瓦解的缝隙。再者，事件化的一个创作的呈现呢，是在时间当中的展演，去发酵出美学的感性呢，那它得以去收纳、跟承载、跟记录、跟留下这一份感性的，无疑就是最合适的媒介，无疑就是影片了。那这个简短的分享里面，借由华山，还有后宫艺术季由在地实验跟黄明川等2组团队的案例，我们可以看到记录者在艺术网络当中所扮演的行动者的角色，而他们2组人马在影片拍摄之后的20到30年之间，分别公布于 YouTube 还有建立影音档案库如在地实验，还有发行 DVD 如黄明川导演的方式曝光在我们的数位网络时代。就算是时空迥异影片带给我们的讯息，其实已经不再只是转播现实了，而是更多是记录历史。数位化之后的艺术纪录片进入短影音横行的串流时代，所以我们 遇到影片、看到影片的方式有更多是因为关键字的串联而偶遇。所以在这个去中心化的网络时代，如今我们也需要以行动者的姿态，为更零散的数位影音爬出他们的脉络。那进入影片，随着镜头察言观色，聆听难以言喻的现场，会是我们进入90年代艺术史研究工作的时候去感知空间的一个重要的方式。好，那这些是我的参考资料的来源。那这个议题可以形成，也非常感谢在地实验跟黄明川，谢谢。
Thank you for all this wonderful organization and the invitation to speak today. So, when the Viet Minh gained independence from French colonial rule in 1945 and the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, or North Vietnam, was established in 1954, the term independence only meant one thing: national sovereignty and freedom from foreign rule. Since then, in the North, and after reunification with the Republic of Vietnam in the South in 1975, it became one of the three components of Ho Chi Minh ideology: Độc lập, tự do, hạnh phúc, or independence, freedom, and happiness. To this day, these three words figure on banners, official letterhead, and various national buildings throughout the country, and yes, a tattoo, as you see here. The term independence has specific historical significance. However, it does not apply to the status of individual citizens, who, for the most part, find themselves dependent on the state. I'm ruminating on the nuances of the term independence in the context of Vietnam here in order to situate the country's first independent art space within the historical framework of the 1980s and 1990s, when the country was undergoing drastic economic, political, and social changes, and concepts such as freedom and independence took on new meaning. The case study under examination in this paper is Salon Natasha, commonly recognized as Vietnam's first independent art space in the late socialist period of post-reunification Vietnam. Independent art spaces do not appear out of nowhere, and I'm happy that Nicole asked the same question that I had already asked, which is, first of all, to be independent, one has to ask, independent from what? And from whom? And in the case of Vietnam's political slogan, independence is achieved at a moment of liberation from a previous condition of dependency. Independence, in this sense, means emancipation. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Hanoi, an art space that called itself independent, was an art space that did not depend on the state, not just for funding, but more importantly, was independent ideologically. That is, it did not conform to the regulations that had been put in place by the government. Independence in the art world was a concept that had to have been conceived of as a possibility and had to be achieved under the right conditions. In the case of Salon Natasha, one can identify several factors that enabled its independent status. For one, its location in the private home and studio of artist Vu Dân Tân. Secondly, its exhibition programs, as the first exhibition space that organized exhibitions based on themes before the word curator made its way into Vietnamese vocabulary. Third, and finally, the time period in which it operated. The years between 1990 and 2005 were among the most pivotal in the history of modern and contemporary Vietnamese art. For Salon Natasha to be considered independent, one may also need to consider it as a dialectic. It can only be independent in relation to other art spaces that would not be deemed independent. And one may be tempted to say that it was independent because it was not part of the establishment, but for that one may need to understand what constitutes the establishment and the non-establishment in Vietnam, which was not always so clear. In China or the Soviet Union, there were at times a clear binary opposition between official and non-official forgive my pronunciation, Guanfang and Fei Guanfang, or conformist and nonconformist art, but the categories of established versus non-established fluctuated. And one has to understand why it was important for Sanno Natasha to be independent and what kind of independence it managed to achieve. So for the purposes of this presentation, I will elaborate on these three factors before reflecting on the legacy of Sanno Natasha in relation to other art spaces and the role that, more importantly for Asia Archive here, the role that the Sanno Natasha Digital Archive has played in this historicization. So the first factor that enables us to consider Sanno Natasha as independent is its physical location and the type of physical structure that it occupied. Sanno Natasha was located at 30 Hangbong Street, sorry, I should keep this one, at the heart of Hanoi's Old Quarter. It was the home of artist Vu Zentan, who was born in 1946 and died in 2009. Tan grew up in the house with his parents and sister. His father was publisher and playwright Vu Dinh Long, right, I'm getting lost in my images, who was the author of Vietnam's first Western-style spoken play, A Cup of Poison, in 1921. Long ran a profitable publishing house during the colonial period, and he and his first wife lived in a French-style villa, which is more of like this building, further down the same street until the communist government confiscated it after independence in 1954. They moved to 30 Hangbong, a former Chinese-style tubular shop house that faced a busy main thoroughfare of the Old Quarter, with the rest of the house running deep into the back alley. In 1954, the communist government had randomly reassigned housing to the population in dividing property, and the family found itself living in cramped quarters, having been allotted only a portion of the house. But luckily, their apartment was the section that faced the street. And one can trace back, therefore, the genealogy of the location to a commercial shop setting that had a public-facing component. Vu Zentan himself liked to emphasize this quality of Sanno Natasha to be both public and private. Public because anyone could enter from the street, and private because it was his home. This is Vu Dinh Long, so this is Vu Zentan's father, came from an intellectual family. And in 1960, at a meeting organized by the Writers Association, and I'm very happy that we spoke just previously to this to a writer and a publisher, because Vu Dinh Long was a publisher as well. So at a meeting organized by the Writers Association, he was denounced as a counter-revolutionary. He then became a character in his own play and drank poison that would kill him. Vu Zentan was 14 years old at the time of his father's death, but he vowed to never join any official organization. This was his first act of independence. Although he had nothing other than the ideological zeal that killed his father from which to emancipate himself, he chose the path of independence first by eschewing formal art education and becoming a self-taught artist, taking only private lessons from graduates of the École des Beaux-Arts de l'Indochine. He worked for a time for the cartoon studio of Hanoi Television and traveled to Cuba and acquired a worldly education on his own. He cultivated friendships among his peers, who had also refused to join the growing number of official arts organizations. His home became a meeting site for a growing community of like-minded artists, writers, and musicians who opted to stay away from established art organizations. The pivotal moment in his education came after someone brought a Russian student in philosophy and linguistics, Natalia, known as Natasha Kraevskaya, to his home, and they fell in love. The couple married in 1985 in Hanoi, But in 1987, they moved back to the Soviet Union for a few years, and it was there that Vuzantan witnessed firsthand the changes that swept across Soviet culture under Mikhail Gorbachev's rule at the time. Coined perestroika and glasnost, or restructuring and openness respectively, these policies impressed the artist, who wondered whether such changes could also take place in Vietnam. Since the end of the war and the reunification of Vietnam in 1975, the country had been stifled by economic embargo and sunk to extreme poverty. In addition, ideological restrictions prevented artists from expressing themselves freely or participate in international exhibitions. Until the mid-1980s, official or established or conformist art in Vietnam was art that contained what was then called Tin Dân Tộc, or national sentiment, that is, patriotic themes of farmers and soldiers, landscapes and portraits of workers and peasants. Nudes and abstract art were forbidden, and artists had few opportunities to show their work outside of the national exhibitions and the exhibition spaces managed by the Artists Association. After graduating from the National Universities of Fine Arts in Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City, most artists joined the association in order to receive the required privilege to show their work collectively. And as the country still abided by strict Communist Party rules, artists could not sell their work in an open market. However, a small number of foreigners who lived, visited, or worked in Hanoi, usually from the Soviet bloc or sometimes from Sweden, often found their way to the homes of artists such as Vuzantan, and sometimes offered to buy small works of art, drawings, or paintings that could be carried outside of the country, rolled up in their suitcases. So although there was no official art market, sales did take place among the non-official circuits. So after returning from the Soviet Union, Vuzantan had the idea to turn his home and studio into a salon, in the French and Russian meaning of the term, a place for congregating among friends, a meeting place for exchange of ideas and community building. Thus, artists came and went, and those who gathered there brought their own ideas into the space, and when they left, they carried new ideas home with them. Natasha Kraevskaya recently asserted that the most important aspect of the space was collaboration. This highlights the ideological differences between Salon Natasha and the state art institutions. Salon Natasha also, paradoxically, pointed directly to the contradictions inherent to the established art institutions. Because while communism ideally would encourage community and collaboration, ironically, most artist members of the Artists Association rarely worked with one another. They merely brought their paintings or sculptures to a designated location, which would then be viewed by officials that would approve it or not for exhibition in public. And while communism would also, in theory, promote a sense of equality, the system turned into an elite club that only accepted members via a selection process, including kinship and social status. So Salon Natasha, on the other hand, was inherently open to all, as the door of the space rarely closed except at night. Vuzantan embraced the paradoxical nature of independence in the 1990s and early 2000s in insisting that his home was a private space that was public. He placed his shoes in the middle of the salon to signal that the salon was also a home, where it was customary to remove one's shoes before entering. Another fundamental difference between Salon Natasha and other spaces was its exhibition program and exhibition methods. First, it must be said that few exhibition spaces existed or still exist, including museums in Vietnam. There's still a handful at most of art spaces. The National Museum of Fine Arts in Hanoi is still merely a showroom for historically important paintings that never rotates and that is never properly curated, nor does it organize temporary exhibitions. An exhibition hall with a turnover of exhibitions does exist, as you see here, managed by the Artists Association, housed in a building built in the late 1970s brutalist Soviet style at 16 Ngo Quyên Street. It stands in contrast to the Opera House nearby, a major landmark of the city, built during the French colonial period. The hall, still in operation today, consists of 3 floors of hanging space that artists can reserve for a fee. There's a building manager and a security guard, but no curator in charge of selecting the works. Sorry. Aside from that space, there are a number of commercial galleries that started to appear in the early 1990s that operated under the same methods. Hang paintings haphazardly like a market stall with no attempt at matching them in style or technique. From the beginning, Salon Natasha cultivated a culture of collaboration whereby artists could create works on site and come up with connected themes. Neither Vuzentan nor Natasha Kraevskaya dictated the subject matter that united the artists. Instead, artists brainstormed exhibition ideas together. And more than an exhibition space, and more than Vuzentan and Natasha Kraevskaya's home, Salon Natasha was a studio. Children came to make art projects led by Vuzentan. Artists came and drew, sketched, sculpted, discussed art history, literature, and philosophy there. They played music, ate, and drank. They also took initiatives to come up with new ideas for group projects. One artist could come up with an idea and then invite the others to spend time at the salon realizing the works that culminated in an exhibition sometime later. For example, Bui Hu Hong thought of lacquer medium size small in 1996, whereby artists would paint small 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter wood panels with lacquer. The artist, so here's some examples of them working in the salon on the lacquer. That's a larger lacquer, sorry. Nguyen Van Cuong came up with the exhibition 12 O'Clock in 1997 and invited artists to make clocks out of various materials. And the space was open to experimentation, creativity, and play. These are some of the clocks. Very humorous and multimedia riffs on the concept of time and clocks. The final factor to consider is the time period when Salon Natasha was in operation. Here, I'll go back to this one. It opened in 1990, shortly after the Vietnamese government instituted the series of economic reforms known as Doi Moi, when certain regulations began to relax. The salon would not have been possible prior to that. Certainly not during the period of war between 1954 and 75, and not during the decade following the war, known as the subsidy period, when the country was under economic and social duress. And then it ceased its operations in the early 2000s, when the art community started to flourish and international curators began to visit the country and artists started to participate in exhibitions around the world. In other words, the independent nature of Salon Natasha gradually lost its meaning as the establishment started to shift towards more openness and experimentation. In addition, other alternative spaces opened, such as Nha San Duc in Hanoi, San Art in Ho Chi Minh City, and later the Factory, Manzi, and more recently the Outpost. Here's some examples. These spaces would not have existed without the pioneering spirit of Salon Natasha. But they also differ in many ways because they were established in a different historical context. Salon Natasha operated as a space for creativity within an environment of restricted creative expression. As experimental art, video, sound, and moving image have become much more mainstream, it is difficult to consider these alternative spaces as anti-establishment in the same way. And I know this came up this morning too. So, moreover, many of these alternative spaces, and one can certainly call them that, are funded by private collectors and patrons, but not necessarily self-funded as Salon Natasha was. So there's these other spaces that exist now. The factory. So in 2012, Asia Archive launched the Salon Natasha Archive, a digital resource that compiled 5,000 documents pertaining to the activities and events at the Salon. It was one of the first digital archive projects initiated by Asia Archive and took 2 years to build. The process of archiving the material encouraged both myself, as the supervisor, and Natasha Kraevskaya to rethink the character of the space. In creating a tree that included a chronology, and this was Janet Chang at the time that encouraged us to think of this tree. Creating a tree that included a chronology of events that took place in the space, we began to see connections between people and the space. People came to the space, and the space also went out to other places. Here are some of the trees, for instance. I can go back to these, of course, but in 1998, Cross Currents, for example, was a correspondence art project where Salon Natasha artists and Australian artists exchanged drawings by post. 2 minutes. Salon Natasha also traveled to Finland, which recreated the space in an exhibition titled The Spirit of Hanoi. Okay, I'll go back to some of these. This is the Cross Current, sorry. In an exhibition titled The Spirit of Hanoi in 1998, the documents that form the Salon Natasha archive not only attest to the spirit of experimentation that was at the heart of the Salon, but also demonstrate the context in which Salon operated as a site of collaboration. So it's fitting that AAA, whose foundation is built on the idea of shared resources, would house the Salon Natasha archive. Once a physically shared space, it's now a virtually shared space. The archive gave the Salon a second life, an extended and permanent home, now that the physical space of Salon Natasha has been demolished. It also situates the Salon in a historic framework of the 1990s, a context which has now disappeared. So I'm finishing now. So what made Salon Natasha independent? It eschewed government-sponsored spaces, straddled both the public and the private sphere. It was self-funded and had an exhibition program based on collaboration and themes selected by the artists. It did not abide by the regulations governing art in the early decades of Doi Moi, which requested that all artists seek permission to exhibit work, and instead created exhibitions based on artists' whims, spontaneously and collectively inspired themes. The paradoxical nature of the space was further reinforced by the collaborative nature of its activities. And finally, the early 1990s themselves were years when the Artists Association still held authority in determining artistic production, but was gradually losing its grip. So it was only in this historical context that Salon Natasha could appear as an alternative to the mainstream, elude government regulations, and make its mark as a site of artistic creativity and experimentation. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you all for taking the time to be with us here today. The text is quite long, so I'm just going to go into it. I'm the one talking, but we both wrote this. In a press statement released by its board on 2nd March 2021, the substation announced that it would permanently close after 31 years of operation as Singapore's first independent art centre. This followed a series of closures of art spaces in the preceding years, including the closure of Independent Archives' physical space in 2019, the loss of Center 42 space in 2020, and the NTU CCA's loss of its exhibition and residency spaces in 2021. While this news came as a surprise to some, others saw it as confirmation of rumors that had been circulating for several years prior. 3 days later, roughly 300 members of Singapore's arts community attended an online town hall organized by the substation, where the general sentiment was that the decision to close the organization was not the board's alone to make. During the town hall, many voiced their concerns and others offered proposals on how the organization could continue to exist. The following months saw a flourishing of grassroots organizing in the arts community, primarily coordinated through the 900-strong Facebook group, The Substation Venue, open bracket, futures, close bracket, which held discussions, workshops, and writing clinics aimed at submitting proposals for the substation's continuation to its board. Their efforts in securing the substation's continued operations suggest the substation's importance to the arts community in Singapore. So, to better understand the substation's role and significance in Singapore's cultural landscape, it may be useful to examine exhibition venues before its establishment. For the most part, these venues fall into the following categories: commercial galleries, libraries, exhibition spaces inside government or trade buildings, departmental centers, art supply and framing stores, hotels, and other foreign and cultural institutions such as the British Council, Goethe Institute, and Alliance Française. The choice of venue was also largely influenced by the cultural affinities of the exhibition organizers and the artists. For instance, between the 1940s and 1970s, the exhibition hall of the Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce housed most of the exhibitions organized by the Society of Chinese Artists, partly due to the strong ties between the society and the local Chinese businessmen, many of whom were patrons of the society. Similarly, in the first 8 years of its existence, most, if not all, of the Singapore Art Society's exhibitions were held in the British Council headquarters on Stamford Road, a natural choice, as many of the Society's founding members were either affiliated with the Council or were part of the Stamford Road group who had met regularly at the premises for painting sessions. It was only after the building's demolition that the Society started organizing its exhibitions at other venues, like the Victoria Memorial Hall, the National Library, and open-air spaces like the Limbo Seng Memorial at the substation. Now, typically during this period, exhibitions were short-lived, often lasting between 4 to 6 days. And since many of these venues were not exclusively dedicated to artistic activity, they would revert back to non-art functions after each exhibition closed. So, answering decades of calls from artists for a dedicated exhibition hall, the National Museum Art Gallery was established in 1976. As part of efforts to modernize the National Museum, part of the building was converted into a modern art gallery. With 8 air-conditioned galleries equipped with state-of-the-art facilities, the art gallery was envisioned by its director, Christopher Hui, as a center for the art, housing permanent and temporary exhibitions curated by the gallery, while also offering rental opportunities to local artists. The NMAG would go on to be one of Singapore's most important venues for hosting exhibitions, and by 1988, 2 years before the opening of the substation, it was described as the only somewhat presentable place for exhibitions in Singapore. Within the first 2 decades of its existence, NMAG had housed over 230 shows, including those by international artists like Zhao Wuti, Paul Klee, and Joseph Beuys. So as to uphold its reputation as an institution concerned with matters of high artistic merit and cultural excellence, all permanent and temporary exhibitions held at NMAG were decided upon by a committee of museum professionals and external representatives. This process was inherently subjective and prone to bias, a point that NMAG itself acknowledged. describing its decisions regarding contemporary art to be, and I quote, informed guesses by intuition rather than absolute knowledge, end quote. This had resulted in decisions that suggested some degree of resistance to newer forms of art that did not comfortably fit within the institution's definition. One notable example of this is the 1980 exhibition titled Earthwork by contemporary artist Tang Da-Wu. And as part of this exhibition, the artist presented works stained with soil and other natural pigments alongside an arrangement of dried soil and clay within the permanent exhibition spaces of the NMAG. In retrospect, while this is arguably one of the earliest exhibitions of land art in Singapore, Earthwork was not well received by segments of the museum. Many were questioning this new form of art. The exhibition was shut down just 3 days after its opening and subsequently relocated to the exhibition hall of the local news publisher Sin Chiu Jit Po. So it's with this pre-existing context in mind that the late playwright and activist Kuo Pao Kun founded the substation in 1990. Over the next 30 years, the multidisciplinary breadth of its programming and their commitment to cultivating creative experimentation would cement their position in the collective imaginary of artists in Singapore as a site of liberatory creativity, insulated from outside pressures. However, in its earliest days, the substation's independence as an art center was not articulated as a distinguishing feature. Based on press coverage of the time, it was heralded as Singapore's first collective center for the arts. Taken together with statements by Pao Kun and other stakeholders, what was groundbreaking about the substation was permanence and collectivity, with Pao Kun stating that his aim was to make the substation as multi as possible, and that the substation would be a permanent place to do arts, see arts, talk arts, and live the arts. So to bridge the distance between the substation as our first independent art center and the substation itself declaring permanence and collectivity as its core elements, I think we could suppose that permanence and collectivity are the specific kinds of independence that the substation was built to realize, to push back against a pre-existing artistic landscape of impermanence and atomization. In the absence of a permanent home, quoting Pao Kun, the artist could occupy a place for a few hours during a performance or an exhibition, and then they are homeless, end quote. As previously mentioned, these temporary sites of artistic coalescence were siloed in accordance with affinity groupings and pre-existing social divisions. Under such conditions, it becomes difficult for artists to, quoting Pao Kun again, mingle and encounter strange artistic activities far removed from their own, end quote. As an antithesis to transience and fragmentation, the substation would be a place for sustained gathering and collaboration. Building this capacity for community from across a range of disciplines and social backgrounds represents an independence from isolation, an independence from reproducing pre-existing sociocultural divisions. Art's presence would no longer be a temporary state of exception, but a persistent part of society. So the substation's capacity to serve as a place of community can be seen in the nature of its premises and its immediate environs. In addition to its gallery, theatre, and studio spaces, the substation also included an open-air garden behind the building proper, which Pao Kun saw as an important link to nature. The garden played host to anything from children's mural paintings, Sunday flea markets, poetry recitals, to innovative experiments in performance art, talks, lectures, gatherings of every kind. The substation was also a crucial venue in Singapore for independent music, what musician Joe Ng called, quoting, liberal, left-wing, unpretty music, anything that was non-mainstream, end quote. Taken as a whole, the substation and its surroundings as a home for the arts enabled community and collaboration through its permanence. However, this very crucial aim of permanence and community was kind of at risk from the start. In remarks published even before the substation opened, Pao Kun noted, quoting, I don't know if it'll be a going concern. We need financial support. Otherwise, it'll open for 2 months, then it'll run out of money. So, just to lend some context here, the initial costs of establishing the substation was split between the government and Pao Kun's company, with the government committing $1.07 million to restoring the building, and Pao Kun's company, PVACL, paying about $500,000 for fitting out and renovation works. In today's terms, that's 2.8 million Singapore dollars. So after spending all that money, the ministry decided that the only other support that they would extend was a nominal rate of rental on the first lease. As for the cost of maintaining and operating the art center, PPACL would have to raise the money, whether through donations, sponsorships, venue rentals, ticket sales, so on and so forth. So just 3 months after the substation opened, then Minister for Information and the Arts, George Yeo, commented on these financial difficulties, noting that if the public approved of the substation's activities, the public itself would support them financially. Quoting the minister, "But if your appeal has no resonance, then maybe these activities are ahead of their times. The government's approach should not be to prescribe. It should be to facilitate and should be market conforming, which means that if there is support from the general population, if donations are forthcoming, contributions are forthcoming, and then obviously the government should support even further to build on the success." End quote. The minister's comments seem, refreshing, a cultural policy that's neither prescriptive nor dictatorial. However, in this assertion that the ministry's allocations of funds should tail the market, there is an apparent commitment to the idea that the market forces are an authentic expression of popular will. Unexamined within that commitment is the contradiction between the substation's mission of incubating bold, trailblazing artistic work and the need to conform to the market, to design the substation's program along the lines of what is already known to sell. Sorry, pages. Potentially latent within his comments is a realization that these same market pressures could be used to wield effective censorship without giving the appearance of authoritarian overreach. In other words, a permanent state of precarity could be used as an effective constraint on the permanence of this home for the arts, which is not to say that the substation was free of overt censorship. So between 8 and 10 May 1994, the substation presented the Artist Project, a scriptless multimedia performance event at the Guinness Theatre as part of the annual Raw Theatre programming. So the participating artists here were Amanda Heng, Lee Weng Choi, Siu Ki Leong, Naotaka Adachi, and Susie Lingham. This event took place amid the sensationalized media coverage over Joseph Ng's controversial performance act at the Artists General Assembly, AGA, co-organized by the Artist Village and Fifth Passage just 5 months prior. At first, the substation had been invited by the National Arts Council to include Raw Theatre 3 in the 1994 Singapore Festival of the Arts Fringe. However, as the AGA controversy developed, the council soon grew apprehensive about Lingham's participation, given her role as the co-founder of Fifth Passage and her proximity to controversy. So, in a letter from the NAC, then Director of Arts Programs, Liu Chin Choi, informed the substation that the council would be unable to support Raw Theatre unless Lingham was withdrawn from the Artist Project. This approach differs from the traditional methods of censorship, which typically involves denying the licenses necessary for a performance or exhibition to happen legally. Instead, the council sought to pressure organizations and venues reliant on government funding and compel them to disassociate themselves from targeted individuals or groups, thereby limiting their exhibition opportunities. And the substation was not the only organization subjected to such pressures. As Ray Langenbach later recounted, he'd been instructed by the art department of the National Institute of Education that any association with or invitation to the two girls from Fifth Passage could threaten its access to government grants. It remains unclear whether the NIE had received correspondence from the council similar to what the substation received, which prompted this directive, or whether this was purely a case of NIE exercising self-censorship, and adhering to newly demarcated out-of-bound markers, OB markers for short, we love our abbreviations, that included Fifth Passage. Regardless, this incident exemplifies how the Council's approach was arguably successful in compelling certain segments of the arts community to alienate the Fifth Passage artists. However, despite these pressures, Park Kun stood by the artists and his support of the artist project and resisted the Council's demands. Such a decision could not have been easy, given that the substation was itself facing issues securing sponsorship for the program. Guinness, the title sponsor, had announced in the previous year that it could no longer continue due to budget constraints. So while the details of the discussion between Park Kun and NAC are unclear, Royal Theatre 3 was eventually reinstated into the festival fringe with no additional limitations imposed onto the program. However, it is worth noting that all its programs were excluded from the festival guide, purportedly due to scheduling issues, and had faced issues securing media interest. So these were the constraints that would haunt the substation over the years, to push the envelope of creative expression without overstepping the OB markers, while also navigating the contradictions between its stated mission and the need to conform to the dictates of the market. The substation's operational capacities would also be constrained by the constant need to seek funds, whether by appealing to donors, molding itself to the funding frameworks of the NAC, or otherwise raising revenue. Some of these methods of raising revenue could be thought of as being in line with the substation's overall mission, renting out space for performances, exhibitions, workshops, and even the small cafe in the garden. In terms of the overall scale, it didn't really compromise the character of the substation. I just saw the time's up sign, but I'm going to try and finish. Sorry. So in 2005, financial pressures would lead the substation to lease out its garden to Timber, an upmarket bar which operated on a much larger scale than the modest Fat Frog Cafe that had previously inhabited the garden. What was once a quiet pocket of green space became a bustling 255-seat live music venue with nightly cover bands, theatre, performance art, flea markets, as well as hardcore punk and other independent music shows were closed out, having to make do with the substation's Guinness Theatre. Similar to the garden's transformation into Timber, the surrounding neighborhood was also undergoing gentrification, with the disused Tao Nan School being refurbished as the Peranakan Museum and the upscale restaurant True Blue Cuisine moving on the other side of the substation. These shifts in the neighborhood's character would see frictions, such as in 2008, a small protest by members of the punk and hardcore music communities. This was in response to complaints made to the substation by the Peranakan Museum and True Blue Cuisine concerning the conduct of these concert-goers of hardcore and punk shows at the substation. According to organizer and artist Zai Kuning, the museum and restaurant had requested that concert-goers not congregate in the streets and common areas outside their establishments. One of the restaurant's co-owners would also be quoted in the press, remarking that some concert-goers had acted, quote, worse than barbarians, and that while he was supportive of pop culture, quote, what we're against is people sitting around making the place look like a slum. In comments that Zai Kuning would later make on the arts community mailing list, the artist posed the question, will these interests also pressure the substation to concede that its activities make the street look like a slum? If substation keeps on bowing their heads to such commercial establishments, it's not hard to imagine what will eventually become, gradually or overnight. So as the substation's second decade of operation drew to the close, it was hemmed in from multiple directions, constraining its capacity to be a permanent home for the arts, a gentrifying neighborhood enclosed it from without, while the ever-mounting need for revenue saw the substation cede a crucial part of itself. These changes were keenly felt by the substation's community of artists, not only on an effective level, but in immediate material terms, like the restrictive requests made of the substation by its neighbors. Timber's nightly musical acts would also reverberate through the substation, a sonic affront that film screenings, theater productions, art exhibitions, workshops, and talks had little choice but to accommodate. So in 2010, Zai Kuning submitted a proposal for the 2011 Singapore Biennale titled, I Will Send You to a Better Place. His artwork proposed to close Timber for the duration of the Biennale, temporarily restoring the garden to its prior state. During this period of reprieve, Zai Kuning would extend an open invitation to the arts community to once again fill the garden with music, performances, screenings, readings, and so on. In correspondence with Biennale Artistic Director Matthew Nui, Zai Kuning laid out the nature of his proposal, stating, "What is the work? The work is to challenge both the arts community, substation management, and timber on the issue. How the garden has been jeopardized with a business-oriented event with very little effort made to make certain connection between people from various art backgrounds, to use a common space in search of the local voice and work, with an openness to appreciate each respective form of expression beyond what I call nightclub music, drinking, and drunkenness, which is perfect in any commercial place like Boat Quay, etc." End quote. Negotiations did not work. Timbero asked for $1 million, while also signaling their lack of interest in moving at all, even if the price could be met. Outside of this documentation, "I will send you to a better place," was left unrealized. So all of the trajectories that had led to this point, the precarity engendered by gentrification, raising revenue for rental and operational costs, resolving the contradiction between market conformance and the OB markers of censorship, and fostering independent experimental creative practice would continue to develop over the course of the substation's last decade at Armenian Street and converge on one point: the loss of its physical premises, and now it operates in an itinerant fashion. In some respects, it still has independence, retaining collectivity, autonomy, but what it has lost is its permanence, and has returned to the homelessness that Pauken sought to end. And I think you could frame this ironically as an independence from having premises at all, but in material terms, this is nothing other than a diminution of the substation's independence. Anyway, they're still in operation, so there's no conclusion to the story just yet. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andy and Bruce. Please return to your seat. We will prepare for the Q&A section. Thank you.
Of your relevant research areas. Laura, you have spoken about the archives of Salon Natasha, which you have worked with AAA to build, which is a very important archive. I hope that we can go a little bit deeper to questions like how are archives built, how are they kept, what are the methods that are used to make them accessible and to preserve them, and if you can give us some examples of new perspectives, new contents that were enabled by making accessible the archives, and if there are any interesting, inspiring academic or curatorial projects that are also enabled with the archives. Yeah. Since Noah, you have spoken some part of it, so can I ask you to start with this?
Thank you. Well, the most important thing is that the archive exists in a way that the physical space of Salon Natasha no longer exists. So it enabled Salon Natasha to survive in many ways, virtually. Because at the time that we made the archive, that was not the case. We had not anticipated that the physical space would disappear. And so we did have to understand that creating the archive, Salon Natasha, was not reproducing the physical space of the archive anyway. It was to give it another form, a different entry point into what exactly was Salon Natasha. And so we had to think conceptually of the space as... so it wasn't historicizing Salon Natasha, because Salon Natasha had kept a lot of documents, unlike many spaces. It kept documents, but never with the intention of creating an archive. So there are always going to be, archives are always incomplete, because they're never intended to have been built that way. So we knew that we couldn't privilege sort of the document as representative of the whole space or the whole event or the artist's work and so forth. We had to think of the documents as just entry points into particular events and places. And so the tree that I mentioned was really key in understanding that this is how you were going to navigate this space and try to capture the different elements of the space visually, or and go deeper itself. So you'd click on one thing that would lead you to another, and so forth. So it was like a method of entering Sanonatasha. Now I only know, because I don't want to take time from everybody, and I could go on and on about the process, because I learned a tremendous amount as a scholar creating an archive like this. But I am very interested in how other people use it, because I assign students to enter it and to find things there. But I do know that a couple of PhD dissertations have been written looking at Sanonatasha archive and trying to get a sense of the 1990s. Rather than saying, okay, they're trying to understand what Sanonatasha was about, they're saying they're trying to understand the 1990s in Vietnam, and they're using Sanonatasha archive as a way of accessing that. And so that's one way of looking at it, of how it's used. Curatorially, I don't know actually if curators have used it, because the digital archive is not the same as the actual physical archives. Natasha still has the physical archives. So I don't know if curators have tried to re-exhibit kind of it's very different from someone like Koh Nguyen Hao in Singapore, but constantly curating his archive and reconfiguring the elements to recreate a story, tell a different story each time with the new documents. That has not been done with Sanonatasha. It still remains kind of on AAA's platform as a way to still to access what was Sanonatasha. But I hope someday people will think about, extracting from the archive a new story or a different kind of story to tell. Yeah, thank you.
Hello. Yes. Yeah. So I think in terms of the substation archives, so maybe I realized that the presentation didn't explained, right, why exactly are we presenting on the substation. So maybe I can just give a very quick overview. Right, so sometime in 2021, right, the National Gallery Singapore was approached by the substation, right? So they knew that they needed to vacate the building within the next 5 to 6 months. So they approached us to see if we were opened, right, to first conduct then a survey, and then the possibility of accepting the archives into the institution. So what was presented to us really was 30 years of organization records, right? So it was in operation for 30 years by then, right? So you have a lot of photographic documentation, AV documentation, exhibition ephemerals, program booklets, and I think importantly it's the minutes of the committees, the board meetings, and such records which are not published. So then it really allowed us to then understand the conversations that went behind the scenes within the institution itself when they made certain decisions throughout the many years of operation. I think the presence of such records also helped corroborate, right, with corroborations. Bruce reminded me that actually a lot of the stories, the anecdotes that we hear of the substation are oral accounts, right? Someone was there, someone witnessed something, right? So then the story is then told and retold again, right? So we were rather thankful in the sense where we came across some documentations which then help corroborate and substantiate on such accounts. I think one example is really on how the substation was very open and democratic in that sense, where even
I don't forget which year, I don't remember which year this was, but this was part of a selection process for the substation's artistic director. And it was like a town hall format where I think 3 finalists, well, finalists like it's a game show, sorry, 3 shortlisted candidates presented their proposals to, I think, a small audience of people who really care about substation. And then on this basis, the board would make their decision of who would be the next artistic director. And I think this sort of like openness of process within the substation in terms of like how it ran as an organization is like just fascinating to me.
那就是说，我觉得你的工作会比较特别一点啊，因为呢，你的研究对象是纪录片的制作的人，那么比起我们单纯去研究档案，它有加入了多了一个层次啊，因为你研究的是记录的人，同时也研究被记录的对象，对不对？所以说我们想知道的就是你在处理是2个层次的档案。啊，一个是那个影像的档案，一个是影像记录的对象的档案，比如说工业节的档案等等等等，这些资料的情况是怎么样啊？他们怎么保留下来、建立起来，然后他们的使用状况是怎么样？
后工业艺术季在近年尤其是新北市立美术馆等等，即将月底要开馆了嘛？那他们在过去2到3年期间，其实也很积极的去树立他们在90年代开始做北县美展，尤其是北县美展跨入公共领域的时刻的一个历史的发展。所以关于后工业艺术季这个案例呢，确实是在近年有比较多的铺陈。那当然最关键的这个起点呢，因为应该这样讲，我们如果回到95年当下，这个后工业艺术季在结束之后，台北县立文化中心是不让这支影片释出的，所以它有诸多的原因。那也在2014年的时候，立方计划空间去策划《噪音翻图》这一档展览，同时更早一点点的时间，黄明川导演也释出这一支影片。所以在这个95到2014的空白的20年，我们对于这个比较划时代的一个噪音艺术的事件呢，我们都比较属于口耳相传的一个状态。那再往后推，2014到2015呢，我接近到认识到这批档案，也是因为我在地实验所工作。那在这个工作期间，必须要去厘清这些文献或是文宣的一些内容的时候，才开始去了解这样子的一个细节。所以这是一个非常中间可以说是有一个20年的一个无影音的状态，只有文宣，只有口耳相传的状态。然后到了最近10年，可以说是慢慢进入了一个档案化的过程，还有官方的地方的美术馆积极去建立口述史访谈、官方访谈的一个工作的阶段。那至于华山呢，华山就比较很意外的，也比较冷门。在整个台湾在处理公共空间甚至文化园区的一个历史的时候，相较来说没有太全面的一个记录跟探讨跟研究。那我觉得这个反而是我觉得透过这一次的发表，我很想要把他们并置做一个光谱上面的对照，或者是一个意义上面的提出吧。因为这个华山的事件呢，对我来说，它是紧紧扣合着独立艺术空间之于公共空间的某一种，它是某一种伸缩空间，它可进可退，它可以把独立艺术空间的这个概念置放到以集体性的 collective 的方式置放到华山里面，但它也可以去推进某一种很崭新的一个想象。大概这2个案例是这样子。
好，那我现在想邀请 各位如果有意见不是意见想法和问题May I invite the audience for any comments and questions?
Can I just add some
Yes.
parentheses? Because you're talking about how the archive was made. What we said with Natasha was we took everything that she had in our Salon Natasha and dumped it in a big pile and then pulled out things. So how the analogy that we made, because we had no idea what we had really, what the archive was like. So we had to kind of put it all out. And I think that says something also about how archives are made. Anyway, just thought
I think extending on that, right? So from our observations, the substation has a rather good record filing system, right? So on multiple levels, right? Firstly, because I think they are a registered company, they have administrators to do so. Then and on secondly, I think it's because a lot of the things are on exhibition based, right? So then they're also arranged already via chronological manner. So I think maybe the one issue that the National Gallery faced, right, with this project might actually really be on the extent of the material. You can imagine 100 document boxes. We estimate maybe close to 100,000 individual items, right? So if we consider each newspaper clipping as a single item, I think it will take forever to go through. Yeah. So in that sense, we then, as opposed to individual item record archiving, item level record descriptions, right? We then approach on another way in which then we adopted a higher level of folder descriptions so as to balance the time of processing and as well as the access to the researchers. Yeah.
I understand that very well. I deeply understand your concern. Okay.
Hi, my name is Yumin. And my question goes to the two presenters of the third paper. Your presentation sort of centered on the idea of permanence, and the substation being a permanent home, and then finally it wasn't permanent. So I was wondering how you would relate the idea of permanence to the theme of independence, which is the theme of the panel. And is there a relationship between independence and permanence? How do you see the relationship, if there is any? Thanks.
Yeah, I think the way that I frame it is that, as pertains to the substation, its permanence was the kind of independence that it was built to articulate. And I think if we frame that in terms of an emancipation from a previous dependency, and in the pre-substation era particularly, I think one way to characterize it is that there's no one, at least before National Museum Art Gallery is one thing, but going back even further, like your places of artistic congregation were always very contingent and always of very little duration. There was no capacity to coalesce as a community as such. Like, they would still do as best as they could, but there was no specific platform that was really built for it. So I think in this sense, this is the dependency that I think the substation offered a kind of emancipation from.
Hi, thanks. I had a question for Nora about your presentation, which is, I was wondering, you showed the slide of Natasha and Vudanran at their wedding, and you mentioned that they went to the Soviet Union. And I was just wondering if during their time in the Soviet Union, if they visited any apart art or apartment art spaces there, or if Natasha had prior knowledge about these kinds of spaces, and that was part of what informed the formation of Salon Natasha. And I'm asking this because I think one of the things that was behind the thinking for this project was thinking about independent art spaces as being part of this kind of incipient democracy movement or across Asia. But one of the things that I think is interesting about the example you're talking about, Salon Natasha, is that it's also thinking about communist examples of this.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up because it reminds me of one thing I should say is that this archive is a Salon Natasha archive and it's not a Vuzentan archive, and we had to make that distinction also very consciously. So therefore, their time in the Soviet Union is not part of the archive, even though they may have had photographs of it. So, but that relates to your question in that, yes, I think they very much had that in mind. It was the genesis of Salon Natasha, was what they witnessed in the Soviet Union at that time. So the international connections and the concepts of Salon Natasha very much reside in communism, and I think I was trying to articulate that these three components made Salon Natasha possible, and is also what made it independent, is the time period, but the location. And of course, Vietnam at that time period was, its only allies in the world were Soviet bloc. And artists studied in the Soviet Union, and so its connection to Soviet bloc countries was key to Hanoi. And so if you think of Salon Natasha located in Hanoi in the 1990s, and you can't extract it from its relationship to Soviet. It did not have connections with other artists, other countries in Asia, not China either. But gradually, of course, as Vietnam opened, then it had these collaborations with Australia and with other, countries in Asia, but not so much Singapore, actually. So it did gradually open up to other parts of Asia, but you have to think of Vietnam as being very isolated from Asia at that time.
My name is Man Ray. I have a question to actually, to the three presentations. For me, I heard something resonate among the presentations, which is about independence. But for me, independence is very political term. Independent from what? And sometimes independence is a form of freedom. Freedom from what? But in terms of freedom, we also have the freedom to do what? Yeah, if you have the freedom from political barrier, you may not know what to do with your freedom to do things. And so in the case of the art spaces, it has to do with with the limited freedom that you have, you are able to do a lot of things. That is to break through something that is imposed psychologically in the society. In response to the Taiwan situation, 1990s, actually, it's also what we like to term it as a post-martial law period. And actually, I remember Shinro's presentation. She uses the lift of the martial law for spaces. Actually, in the 90s, in Taiwan, what we feel is that the lift of martial law it's a legal political situation, but for majority of the society, so to speak, people still suffer from this kind of psychological barrier that you are not able to do things. And then so for art spaces, during that period, it's about how to do things with the limited tools that you have, because the tools that you actually are confiscated, or the use of media, even the language itself is already taken away for 50 years of martial law. And then in the post-89 situation, it's about how to recapture those tools and then to use it, for artistic expressions. And so I would like to ask, of course, the three presenters already expressed, all these ideas in there. But I want to know how you categorize the post-89 situation globally and locally, how each countries are able to respond to it.
谢谢门瑞的提问，我刚好也可以借机补充。那正如我刚刚提到的，我觉得90年代不管是不是台湾，网际网络跟家用 DV 的兴起，它绝对是把镜头更多的可携带式的镜头朝向日常生活。那我觉得那个独立其实就是企图心很明显嘛，因为两者都有某一种宣言式的宣告说要做独立制片，那独立制片要独立出电影的托拉斯的工业。那在地实验企图做的就是套句创办人黄浩说的，就是《民生报》报道的我们就不报道，或是各个《中国时报》报道我们就不报道，因为显然当时的主流媒体赶不上街头巷尾正在发生的各个艺术事件。那这个新兴媒体或者是新兴媒体造成形成的网络，对我来说它很像是报纸刚刚出现的那个时代，它透过网际网络去传播所谓的影像语言，它形成某一种另外一种共同体的想象。那个另外一种共同体的想象就是我们正在经历着快速变化的艺术的一些变革，它可能不只是限定于 fine arts， 它可能也譬如他们在地实验也曾经报道过大学生的学费，还有美浓反水库的问题。凡是创作者所关注的社会议题，诸如华山，他们都要去记录起来。那我觉得这个部分就是一个自我培力跟自媒体跟独立的一个意识的一个展现，即使它没有一个固定的 space作为一个基地，但是它所呈现的一个状态，还有一个行动跟追捕，追着去记录地点发生在那里就出现在那里去追拍的这个行为本身，对我来说是那个时代可以促成独立艺术空间的一个心理特质。
我觉得你的提问提出一个很重要的面向，我们暂时还没讨论到，就是心理层面上的面向。你提到这一点，因为我们做独立艺术空间的档案的研究的时候，其实的确是发现很多时候所谓的获取新的自由或者对限制的突破，其实很多时候并不一定是非常具体的政治上或者社会上的一些限制，很多时候是一种心理上的，就是对一些老的价值观、旧的价值观，或者是对某些事情做法的一种依赖啊。有时候我们说的独立，就是独立，摆脱这些依赖的一种独立。我觉得这方面的研究其实有可能是非常重要的，但是我们没有做到从心态或者从观念上的变化这样的线索去了解独立艺术空间所带给我们的价值啊。那么我们这个阶段的那个时间也差不多了啊。非常感谢你们各位啊，非常感谢各位。那今天我们的单元就结束了啊，明天还有一天啊，谢谢。
May I ask everyone to give thanks to the 4 speakers and moderator.